Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us so promptly as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Hi
Please,
everyone.
please feel free to say hi to everyone. Put on your cameras. Oh, good.
Hi.
How is the DA office? Hi, Sus. Fantastic to see you.
Hi, guys, just a moment. Someone has a little on. So it was Susan's birthday on Friday. We have a little cake for her. I'm going to call her in for us to sing her happy birthday.
Oh, okay. So everyone who is on the call, just as a reminder, Susan is the lead of the MapDA team. She was on our workshop call before, but I don't think you have come across her. So just before we kick things off, again, feel free to put on your cameras and say hi. And then we will welcome Susan into the office as well. Hi, Nemo. How are you doing?
Hi, Jennifer. Doing well. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Fantastic. As you guys can see, there are quite a few people in this room. They will be facilitators during this workshop and presenters. So we will see. But here comes Susan. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. So bad. Thank you so much. You.
Sorry guys, we're interrupting.
Happy birthday, Susan.
Happy birthday to you.
I think everyone who is online is feeling very jealous. Again, one more reason to show up to the DA office during these workshops. I don't want to break up the festivities or anything, but we do have a pretty strict schedule for today. So I am going to first start this workshop by handing over the room. So during the last session, Sangoro wasn't able to finish his talk, so everyone sent out the video. Oh dear. So I really hope that everyone watched the video. Please ask questions if there are any other questions. And there will be a survey at the end of this. Again, we want to make sure that all the different metrics are clear for everyone and the tasks are all good. Thank you so much again. I'm sorry about the impromptu thing, but I will hand over to Sangoro. So just let's do a 10-minute recap of introduction to malaria before we start the group exercises. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I hope you had a chance to look at the video. But then I think Juniper sent me some questions from your survey, so I'll try and answer those. So for example, the difference between incidence and prevalence. So can any of you, I'll start, is Harriet and Kokoro on the phone, on the call?
Yes, Sangoro, we are here.
Yes. What is prevalence, if you did manage?
So prevalence is the number of cases we ever at a point of a given period of time. out of the total tested population.
All right, cool. Kokoda, what is incidence, if you're on the call?
Incidence.
Yes.
So what I can say about incidence is
Yes.
the number of new cases, number of the new cases emerged in a particular period of time over total number of population in a particular area.
All right,
And
cool. Yes, go on.
it is the measure of risk in a particular geographical area.
Okay. Anyone else? Oscar, or Phoebe, anything else to add?
Yeah, so I can add, so incidence is the number of new cases of disease over total population in a given time. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah,
I
so
can add something. Okay.
yes, please. Go ahead. Go ahead, Phoebe.
Okay, over the total population which is at risk. Yeah. I just
All right,
wanted to
cool.
underline the tail risk.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you. So for prevalence is we can define it as a proportion. So for example, what we need to define with this, what we need to understand with this matrix of disease is the defined population, so the sample population. So for example, we cannot just say we're going to measure what is the disease. Okay, so let me give an example. Prevalence, you'd say, I want to go measure the proportion of cervical cancer in women in Kigoma district from 16 to 45 years. So this is your defined population. This is your proportion, yeah, in Kigoma. So the prevalence would be what is the proportion of women in Kigoma district between 16 and 45 years old who have cervical cancer. Is that clear? Then incidence would be for the population at risk. So for incidence, let me try and explain it this way. And Phoebe, thank you very much for mentioning the at-risk population. So, for example, you've gone to Kigoma in the month of August, yeah, and you want to measure the incidence of cervical cancer. You want to measure how another way we can define incidence. It's a rate how frequent people in Kigoma, how frequent women from Kigoma district between 16 and 45 years get cervical cancer. So let's say hypothetically you have 5 women in Kigoma between 16 and 45 years. Yeah. Then you want to measure, let's say over a month, how many of these women will get, let's say over a year, how many of these women will get cervical cancer? That will be an incident. So for example, you follow them for 1 year, then 2 women get cervical cancer at 6 months. Yeah. So you see, if they get cervical cancer at 6 months, they're no longer at risk. But the 3 women that you treat for 1 year, they stay at risk for 1 year. So your rate of your incidence of getting cervical cancer would be the time at risk would be for the 3 women will be 1 year, but for the 2 women will be they said for 0.5 months, so 0.5 years. So it's 0.5 plus 0.5 plus the 3 years for these 3 women who did not get cervical cancer. So your rate would be, your incidence rate would be 2, which is the number of cases you got over the year, plus 1 year plus 3 years for the women who did not get cervical cancer, plus half a year for the 2 women who got cervical cancer. So it is the number of cases, the number of new cases that you get over a period of time for the person times at risk that you have sampled. Does that make sense? Does it?
Yes.
It does? Yeah, so the incidence would be 2 over 3 years plus 0.5 plus 0.5, so that is 4 years. So it would be 2 over 4 years. So the rate at which women get cervical cancer in Kigoma district would be 2 cases over 4 years, which is 0.5 cases per person per year. All these people who are followed for 1 year, but how long were they at risk? You understand?
Yes.
Yes. So it is a number of people with disease who are a new case over the number of people at risk who are sampled. Any questions? Okay, so is that clear for everyone? Yeah, so you will for incidence, remember the person time at risk, and for prevalence, remember the proportion, the defined population of the people who are sampled. Then there is the measures of association, yeah? So measures of association, we're going to go just through 3 different metrics that you're going to commonly come across. This is risk difference, relative risk, and odds ratio. So the risk difference is, so it's the difference in risk between the groups, between 2 groups. So let's say we have a group of non-smokers and a group of non-smokers. What is the difference in risk? So risk is just basically, I will define it simply, the probability of getting a disease. So let's say, what's the probability of getting a disease if you're a smoker? What's the probability of getting a disease if you're a non-smoker? So again, if we have 5 individuals, yeah, in exposed and non-exposed. So let's say 3 out of 5 individuals get lung cancer, so that the risk is 3 over 5. If 1 out of 5 individuals of the people who do not smoke get cancer, that is 1 over 5. So the risk difference would be 3 over 5 minus 1 over 5. It's just the absolute risk in the difference of getting cervical cancer. Relative risk is the ratio between the risks. So it would be 3 over 5 over 1 over 5. Someone raise a hand or something if you do not understand.
Thank you so much, Sangoro. I think with the metrics, again,
Yeah.
it is the slide and on the website as well. I think it will also be useful during this workshop when we will be using these metrics. Because we are tight on time, I would recommend just over to Punam to outline the workshop for today. And again, anyone has any questions, please feel free to message Sangoro as well. But again, with these metrics and terminology, I think we will get used to it as we are starting to use it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angora, for that nice little recap about different metrics of epidemiology. So welcome, everybody. We are going to use this 1.5 hours to do a little fun data club exercise. So I hope you guys have had your coffees or your teas or whatever keeps you up or awake, because we're going to start getting a little bit more into some of the data components that we possibly will use throughout this course itself. So my name is Poonam Amratia. I have met a few of you during the networking event, but just to let you know, I'm the technical lead for the MapDAR office, and I work on country risk mapping. Today for the Data Club, we're going to have 3 more people joining us, which is Samuel Pong, who's a specialist from previously the National Malaria Control Program of Ghana, and is now currently a PhD student with the MapPath office. We're also going to be facilitated by Hunter and Ruby. So in case you can't see their faces, I had decided to put them here in this presentation. And I apologize, Ruby, because the names for some reason have gotten a little messed up. But throughout this data club, Ruby and Hunter are going to be around to help you with different exercises that you're going to be doing. Sammy is also going to be talking us through something called the DHS program. So without further ado, what are we going to do today? So we are going to have a nice 30-minute session from Sammy about the DHS program, which hosts cross-sectional type surveys. And then we're going to jump into a little data exercise and then have a little bit of a discussion period. At any point, if you guys need a break, please just put it out on the chat or let us know that you need a little break and we'll have some. We will probably take a little break between the data exercise and the discussion time just to allow folks to stretch their legs, because we all know that sitting for too long could be a little tough. With that being said, I also will remain on for this call past the 2 hours in case anybody would just like to talk informally about other types of data sources that we won't go through in this session, but you may have heard through both Sangoro's session as well as Juniper and Janos' session on data management. So the key objectives of today's session is really going through this cross-sectional style data, which is the DHS program. And it's going to be a bit more hands-on experience. So as I said, in the exercise, it's really going to be you guys working through some of this data in itself. So without further ado, I'm actually going to close this little share and hand it over to Sammy, who's going to take us through the DHS program. Sammy, over to you.
Thank you, Poonam. And is it a good morning? Yeah.
It is always a good morning.
All right. Sharing? I'm not. Okay. Okay. So, okay.
Just a quick housekeeping. For those of you who are not in the main room in the DAR office, I really would appreciate if you would keep your videos on. It would help us with making sure that we're engaged throughout the session. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And good morning again. I think the introduction has been done, so I'll just go on. I'm sure everybody knows, most of you know what is DHS. I'm not mentioned this, but the long name is Demographic and Health Survey. And I like what Sangoro was explaining. DHS has been one of the key programs where prevalence studies really are embedded in. And so as we go on, you'll be able to understand. My purpose here is not to make you statisticians or DHS experts, but then just to give you an overview of what it is and then the kind of metrics you're able to get from it, or let's say indicators you're able to get from it. So DHS is a kind of population survey. And by its term population survey, you know it's sampled within the population. But usually population surveys have limitations and they also have advantages. A few of them have been highlighted here. So on the advantages part, because you are going into the households, you are going into the population, you can take the opportunity to measure a wide range of outcomes. You can ask so many questions depending on the time and the money available to you. But once you're in the household, you better take the advantage and, and do what you can do. So you can use it to measure a lot of things. It's quite cheaper relatively than longitudinal studies. When we say longitudinal studies, following a particular cohort every year, you don't need to do that. And so for population surveys, they come in at one time, probably once in every 5 years like DHS, or once in every 3 years like MIS, and then they conduct this. So you are not following the same people over and over again, and that makes it quite cheaper. But what you know is that because of the sampling nature of population surveys, they make the results nationally representative. And I won't go into that more, but then you can talk about the estimates at a national level or at a higher aggregated level. Sometimes you get it even at the regional level or province level. Hardly will you get it at minute level like district or county or even community level. You wouldn't do that because of how the sampling is done. And because it's standardized across countries, it is also comparable. So the same measurement, the same style of sampling is done in Zambia, is done in Tanzania, is done in Ghana. And so when we say the prevalence of HIV from a DHS survey is 21%, and we talk in Ghana and we say it's 14% in Tanzania, the measurements are the same. And so we can compare and you can confidently say, okay, then Tanzania is lower than Ghana, for example, because the rate of measurement or even the process of measuring is the same. And by multi-country comparison, if it's valid, then it's also valid that it can be used for years to year because every year that survey is done, it is the same measure, it is the same protocol that is used to measure the same outcome year on year on year on. And so you can actually compare it over time. They just started in the 80s, and we still can say, okay, progressively or by trend, countries are reducing or increasing in a particular indicator, a particular outcome. And you can confidently compare that from, for example, 2008 to the same metric or the same measurement or the same outcome in 2012 or in 2022 is the same because the sampling methods are the same. But then they are also complex to design, especially when there is an outcome which is very rare. It means that you have to build upon some layers of sampling so that that rare disease, which is not common with the population, can have enough cases to be able to measure. And once you want to do that, it makes the whole sampling frame or the sampling method very complex. For DHS standard is a three-stage sampling method that we use for it. You sample at the national level, you also sample between rural and urban at the national level, and then you want to sample also regionally, where you are having a case or outcome where you want to do it at the district level, then another layer of sampling comes in. So it's quite a complex way of designing it. And we say that usually you can't do it to district level. Some countries have tried to do it at the district level, like India, because they really needed district level estimates. But it costs more. I mean, if you want to go that kind of level. There is also this recall bias because you come in at every 5 years and you're asking, for example, when it comes to issues about birth outcomes, you're asking a woman birth records for the past 2 years. And some of the time, some questions become sensitive or some questions they have actually forgot. You can't ask a woman, did your child get malaria in the past 2 weeks? What did you do first? If the woman has more than 5 children, usually there is this recall bias. He doesn't know whether it's child one, child two, child three. And so there is that kind of recall bias that you get. It's expensive, as I've iterated earlier, information rapidly outdated because if you come and it's a prevalence survey that you have done at this time point, next year it might change, the situation might change, but then because you are not doing repeatedly, that is your reference point, and every year you are referring to that year on year, you are referring to that code. The situation might not be the same, but then that's the only estimate you have. And there is also difficulty to establish causality or causation between predictors and outcomes. So if you find a particular metric, so cervical cancer that Sangoro use is here, you can't relate that, okay, the lifestyle of the woman or predisposing factor of a woman this year, or even at the time of survey, is what caused the cervical cancer. You can't really do any causality or causation between the predictors and the outcomes. And so the common ones that the DHS program, the Demographic Health and Survey Program, undertake is DHS, which is also Demographic and Health Survey, Malaria Indicator Survey, and we have two other ones, the SPA, and then the Multi-Indicator Cluster Survey. But I will just tackle this. I won't go into the SPA. I will just tell you a few things about the DHS MIS, since that is really going to be what we are looking at in this data mining exercise. They are both nationally representative surveys. They are the same sort of sampling frame, done every 4 to 5 years. The only difference is that the DHS is more broader. It also encompasses other health outcomes. So it's not just restricted to malaria. There's HIV, there's reproductive child health, there is WASH, there is economic indices. So it's more broader, but it also contains, as obviously, malaria indicators or malaria-related questions. It's conducted all seasons, so yeah, in most countries, it is not restricted to a particular season. It can be in the dry season of malaria, it can be in the wet season of malaria. In countries where DHS and MIS have been done together, we have had DHS, we have had the DHS done to coincide with a high malaria transmission season so that the indices can be representative of the malaria. But where the DHS is a standalone one, they don't do it. One of the things that you should also know is that DHS typically doesn't include biomarkers. And when I talk about biomarkers, it is the testing and measurement of anemia and malaria prevalence by RDT or by microscopy. You wouldn't have a typical DHS doing that. But then when it is combined with an MIS, then you may have these biomarkers being done. And so malaria indicator survey, as we told, is MIS. It has the same content and it has various components. So we talk about ITN, IPTP, fever, case management. After doing that, it's done in the high transmission setting, and then it is also include biomarkers. All right. So now let's move on. We've talked about this. I've talked about when it started. It started in the 80s. For most countries, it came on later in the years. So far, 400 surveys have been conducted in over 90. And when you go to the DHS program website, you are going to find some tools and some data, platforms where you can get some data from. These two graphs is just telling you where DHS have been done over the years, and that's the green portion of the maps, and where MI is. And by this map, you know, it's mostly centralized in Africa, where the malaria situation is very high comparatively. So there are fewer MISs than DHS, and then the scope or the reach is also not the same. So you have more countries doing DHS. In Ghana, we have had like 2 DHS where we have incorporated MIS components, so we don't have to repeat MIS again. But then the results are comparable across over time. So as I told you, MIS is just a malaria portion of DHS with a biomarker to measure parasitemia. So that's the only difference. All the indicators are the same, just that you wouldn't have parasitemia indices or outcomes in a typical DHS, but you have it in MIS. The DHS sample, national representative, rural urban, I talked about this, provinces, and some variables such as mortality and other rare events, you can't measure it below the national level. It is also really representative below regional level. Yeah. A few words about how it is done. I told you about the sampling strategy. You stratify, you get a whole sampling frame from the national level, you cluster them, and then you list the households and you select households to be interviewed from the list of cluster you have selected. We won't go into this since it's not part of what we do. I've talked about the disadvantages, but then a few things about the limitations. It's a cross-sectional in nature. Things Angoro would have told you what is a cross-sectional data. I've told you about possibility of recall bias, and then surveys exclude non-household population. So if you have a typical setting where most people are nomadics. Most people are in a particular situation where people are outside households. They are displaced population and other things. You don't have this survey going there to look for responses from these people. So people in the streets, institutions are usually not covered under this. Because of time, we have said that over and over again, they are comparable, but then as DHS advances, new ways of measuring some indicators come in. And so if an outcome is not really of global importance, it might not be measured again in a subsequent DHS. So you may have a situation where some metrics are not having some measurement over time. For instance, for ITN, for instance, pre-2000, we didn't have anything like ITN on a national scale. ITNs came in when the RBM targets, got Abuja Declaration came in, and then you had widespread, like you had money funding going to ITNs or net, and so you had ITNs coming in and since 2003, and that is where ITNs started becoming popular and then got measured. So you only have some ITN predating 2000 or 2003. Again, the HIV, when did HIV come? So previously, you wouldn't have HIV until HIV became a global pandemic. That is where then you had most of the DHS, let me say, reporting or recording the DHS. So for low prevalence, you don't need this kind of service. A bit about the data set. So when you go into the DHS website and you want to download the data set, it lists all the surveys that have been done for a particular country. And here you see the various data available for Ghana since 2006. But then you find out the data are in types or in formats. There is a SPSS version, which is recorded already. There's a SARS version, there's a Stata version. So depending on the software you want to use, you can extract this, and then if you are using R, you can use the R you can call in Stata into R, and then you can do your data processing subsequently. Yeah, but typically these are the files that they recode them in. I won't go into this. There are 5, or let me say 4 kind of files that you should typically know if you are downloading. There is a household member recoded. The individual is really women, and there's a children file as well. There is also geographic data, so there is this longitude and latitudes for this cluster that they surveyed, and you can actually download it. Typically, the clusters or the points are not exactly where the sample was taken. So for urban clusters, they displace. When I say displace, if the point is here, they will tell you that it is like they displace it up to 2 kilometers. So you didn't find the exact point and say, I know for this measurement of HIV, I know it is this community. So let me go there. No. So they try to displace it. If it's an urban area, 2 kilometers. If it's a rural area, up to 5 kilometers, so that you may not be able to trace the response to that cluster to protect confidentiality. Enough of the geographic. Some of all these things are there for you. How do I assess DHS data? So there are these 4 ways to assess it. There is this thing we call Stat Compiler. It comes in both a mobile version and also a web version. And that is what typically you are going to use for exercise this afternoon or this morning. There is a mobile version. There is this DHS API where that's for high programming. You can just source the data directly from the DHS website. And of course, if you want the raw files also, you go to the DHS program. We have some indicators that you are going to work with. ITN ownership, ITN use, IPTP, malaria fever and testing, malaria prevention method use. These are all typical MIS service because you have anemia prevalence, you have malaria prevalence. But the first 5 points you can get in a typical DHS. You wouldn't have malaria prevalence and sometimes anemia prevalence in an MIS report if you in a DHS report if you look for it, but you might find it in an MIS report. So know the kind of data or the kind of report you are looking into. And here we've defined some of the indicator metrics that we see. Now, I won't go into this, but I've said that some data are contingent seasonality, and from what Sangro said, epidemiologically, malaria is influenced by seasonality. And so I think that's enough. And once it's a malaria season, ITN use goes up. So if you are looking for a particular way of comparing data, if a DHS is done in typically dry season, you will have ITNs to be low. If an MIS typically is done in a highly seasonal malaria, you find that ITN use is high. So you should be able to know the time when a particular survey was done to be able to say, okay, I'm comparing DHS to MI. And so when you see some fluctuations in a particular trend, when using DHS MI data, think about all these things to make sure that you are aligning or you're comparing apples and apples. So a lot of publications have really used DHS, and just DHS, you have 38,000 and counting. Hits on malaria, you have used DHS data, MI data, you have over 10,000 and counting, almost 11,000. And this is as at last year when I did this hit. This year you may have a lot. Use cases. So for one of them, we are trying to compare malaria prevalence over time. And here you see the national and starting from mixed to into all the time points where DHS have been done in Ghana. And you see that we can comparably say that malaria in Ghana is reducing, especially at the national averages, because we are confident that these metrics were done at the same time, in the same season, and the same way of measurement. And in Ghana, we use this combined with other metrics, the incidence, the all-cause mortality, which are all epidemiological, to really stratify and come up with a national epidemiological profile of Ghana when it comes to malaria. Enough of this. So if you are looking at comparing, you just ask, is this representative? What is the timing? And what happened around it? These are really critical questions that you should ask yourself when you're trying to compare data. A few things, and these are practical things that you are going to, the slides are there to guide you through. We are going to use the start compiler, and as I told you, we are going to use the web version, so you can just Google or let's say put it on your
It's already in the chat.
your address bar in your Google and just say startcompiler.com, and then it will open this dialog box for you. It affords you a lot of things. You can explore data by background characteristics. You can visualize your data into column charts, line graph, thematic graphs, and then you just export it or you just download it. You don't need to come into Excel and do it again. Once you have done your trend, taking your thing, just download the picture or download the graph and then use it for your. So the first step is that you select the country. Of interest, countries are listed alphabetically, so and also by regions of the world. So as you can see here, we are selecting the countries South Asia, and South Asia, all the countries coming. So select the country by the region of the world, and then now you come to the indicator. There are 3 tabs. There's a common indicators indicated by tags, if it's an SDG indicator, or complete list. So try using the complete list because that will give you all the indicators that you are looking for. And then there's a data table where you now customize the survey section. You now choose which surveys you are actually looking for. I don't know the time span for your exercise, but then if it's Tanzania or if it's Zambia, all the DHS or MI that have been done over the period of time will come in. Depending on the indicator, you may not have some years of DHS appearing, but depending on it, you may have all the appearing if it was consistently measured throughout. So you can choose all surveys, or you can choose most recent survey, or you can customize the survey years. You can also add new indicator to it. And then once you've done that, it will give you a table. To give you a table, you can arrange and format the table any way you like it. And once you click the information button, it gives you enough information about what that indicator is talking about and what the figures mean. The underlying population, as I'm going to tell you, always the DHS is specific to a population of interest. And you should not really forget to also make it clear that this indicator I'm looking for, it is for these children or this population within this age group. Don't worry about whether it's weighted or unweighted. It is not important for your work now. As I said, you can visualize it in charts or in column charts, and then you can just extract or download the data as it is here. And here you see the various countries for a particular, and they use the recent DHS to really draw this graph for a particular. So this is basic vaccinations for this number of countries. And you can format your by what quintile, this is how it looks. So for background characters, you choose which are background characteristics you are looking at. For column chart, this is what you do. Line graphs, you can do it, and then you download it as you know. And then you can also do thematic maps with some cutoffs in a particular for a particular measurement, and then you are done. So basically, if you need more information, there's a guided help to do that. But basically, this is all I have for you when it comes to teachers. Sorry, I was rushing, but my timekeeper was here knocking on my head. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sammy. I think that was a nice yes. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I will hand over to Panam now.
Thanks, Sammy. That was a great intro. Before we move on, how about we open the floor if anybody has any questions for Sammy? Please just raise your hand so that we know that you have a question. Harriet, please go ahead.
It's not Eric, it's Oscar.
Okay.
Thank you for the good presentation. But I was curious about something. During the presentation, there was indicators of malaria. One of the indicators said about malaria prevention messages. So I was curious about how do we measure that? Is the number of sessions from the healthcare providers? How do we measure that?
Okay, so usually, it depends on the country. And so for a particular country, you may have a particular malaria advert or a malaria message being rolled out in the country. So they come into the household and ask, have you seen any malaria messages over the past 2 weeks on either national television, on radio, in newspaper, on a billboard, through community health worker, or through, they try to ask diversely, have you heard any malaria message over the past week over the past 2 weeks? And if you say yes, they ask you which one, where did you hear it from? So it might be person to person. You were sitting in a Matata and then somebody talked about malaria, or you were in a hospital and then they talked about malaria. You were watching the TV and a malaria advert came in. You were reading a newspaper and malaria. So any diverse way where you had malaria, they ask you which particular message was it on malaria. Was it on mosquito? Was it on malaria prevention using an ACTs? In some countries, they don't like adverts from pharmaceuticals, so that don't count. So if you have some pharmaceutical company running adverts on television, national television or radio, it really doesn't count because that is biased. But then any other medium that is running malaria campaigns nationally for the program or for the Ministry of Health or even from an NGO, they counted as and you have been exposed to malaria message. So and that's what we have recall bias in it. So you may, to the best of your knowledge, if you have heard somebody talk about malaria, then it counts and they ask you, when did you hear it? How did you hear it? And then that is, and they try to now measure and then calculate how many people have been exposed to malaria prevention messages, how many people have been exposed to malaria treatment messages, for instance. So any advert or any malaria message that has to do with if you are sick, go to the hospital. If you are sick, take an ACT. These count as treatment messages. And so that's how it's measured. Over.
Thanks, Sammy. I hope that answered your question, Oscar.
Yes, yeah. It's fine.
Great. Great. Any other questions for Sammy? Neva, please go ahead.
Yeah. I had a question and you might have covered it, but I'm just curious to understanding the process of deciding which survey to administer. So whether it's the malaria indicator survey or the demographic health survey, and like the time frames for those as well.
A very, very important question. So typically, DHS are very expensive, relatively than malaria indicator survey. Malaria indicator survey are usually, because of its name, it's always useful for just the malaria program or the stakeholders involved in malaria. And so typically in some countries, they just go with the DHS. But then if the interest or the stakeholders of malaria wants to have deep dive information for malaria, then they want. So it has been planned this way in most countries, DHS every 5 years. So if you want to do an MIS, they try to do it in between the years. So it's 3 years after DHS or probably 2 years after DHS. So that it's also, so it becomes like a midway through every DHS. So they do DHS this year, and then 2-3 years down the line, they'll do MIS, then the 5 years, they do DHS, and then so then the MIS also becomes a 5-year thing. If you look at how, so it comes in between every DHS. But if you find that there are resource constraints in a particular country, they may decide that no, we won't do any MIS. If you have money as a malaria program, add it to the DHS, and then let's do a comprehensive survey of it. There have been times in Ghana, for instance, DHS hadn't happened in the past 8 years, but there have been 2 MIS because the other disease components, they didn't have money for a full-fledged, and so we didn't do DHS, we had to do MIS because the malaria program had money, or the stakeholders of malaria had money. So it depends on the country.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Any more questions?
Yeah, Boss J.
We have
I'll ask a quick question. I think Sammy already answered it the moment I raised my hand. The question perhaps here you might just clarify more. My question was very simple to say, does DHS conduct all malaria indicator surveys?
So if you say DHS, now there is DHS program and there's a DHS, which is a survey. So the DHS program is responsible for DHS and malaria indicator survey. So don't confuse DHS program and DHS survey. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's absolutely excellent, and that's why I said you had already touched it when you were responding. But there are also other scenarios, perhaps which you might not have covered, where the DHS program has nothing much to do with the MIS, and Zambia is a classic example. That's why I asked that, and I think Senegal as well. And so you end up having the country is doing the MIS, and they are at liberty to share with DHS or not. And Zambian MISs are not in DHS. You can find them online and the reports, but you cannot find them under DHS. So countries are also at liberty sometimes, like you said, to conduct MISs or other surveys, but still using the DHS modules in order to remain standardized and comparable.
Yeah, I mean that's a very important one. So for those going to do the data mining for Zambia, if there are MIS indicators, you are not likely to find it on the DHS program website. Yeah.
Oh, and also just to say that whenever the two were done in the same year, DHS strategically excluded the malaria component so that deep dive and biomarkers would be done by the MIS.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you
Yeah, thanks for that, Hits. Just so that for clarity, like that means the individual level data. So if you were to go onto the DHS program website, it would be a pretty big challenge because you would not be able to have the raw data available. But you can see the indicators through Stat Compiler, for example, that connect to the report. The MapDAR office, Harriet.
Yeah, so I just wanted some clarification. When you talk about biomarkers, is it testing?
Yeah, so biomarker typically is the anemia malaria testing. And I mean, anthropometric ones are done irrespective of whether it's a DHS or MIS. So typically is the malaria testing and anemia testing. Yeah.
For the malaria indicator survey, it includes this testing, but for DHS survey, it doesn't include testing. So
Please,
how are the
who is asking the question? We can't see.
Harriet, in the office.
Can't see your face.
Yeah, she's.
Anyway, don't worry. Yeah. Okay. Now I see. All right. Please, your question again.
So I was asking if the malaria indicator survey, does it include, if it includes testing, then how does DHS estimate the, say, prevalence of malaria?
Yeah. So as I told you, typically DHS doesn't have biomarker. So if you want prevalence, you wouldn't have in a typical DHS survey. You will have it in a MIS unless the country combined both DHS and MIS. So for Ghana, for instance, DHS 2014 is a combined study, a combined survey between the MIS and DHS, and so you have biomarker. But the DHS 2008, for instance, doesn't have biomarkers. So it doesn't have malaria prevalence. We didn't do an MIS 2022. We did DHS MIS combined. And so you have a DHS with a prevalence in 2022. But if you talk about the MIS, we don't have MIS for 2016, we don't have MIS for 2019. We don't have a DHS for 2016, we don't have a DHS for, but we had MIS. So just have it in mind that If it's prevalence you want, don't think about DHS unless you are sure those two surveys were combined for that year. If it's prevalence, just think about MIS.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oftentimes, if you go to the DHS program's website, if you look under the summary of that survey, they'll mention whether they did biometrics or not. So that will be a nice indication to tell you whether that MIS module, like Sammy said, was included in their DHS survey, if that's helpful. All right, I think now is a great time to let's take a little breather and stretch ourselves before we do a little exercise. I'm gonna let everybody take a little 5-minute break, and we try and come back on the mark of 10 o'clock, if possible. So please feel free to go to the bathroom, grab a coffee or water or whatever you need. But let's meet back in, well, now 4 minutes. My apologies. Okay, great. So if you have any more questions, Sammy is in one particular room, but if you have later on any more questions generally for the group to hear, we'll still provide his email if you'd like to contact him separately to hear more details about the DHS program. So I'm hoping that everybody is back online. Just a reminder, if you are back online, please keep your videos on so that we know that you are in attendance. It also helps with making sure that we're engaging as if we're all together at one space. So it'll be really nice. I'm going to give everybody another minute because I can see a few videos still off. And then maybe we'll begin. And a few connections. In the meantime, for all of those, for the exercise, all material, all slides are available in the Google Drive. Juniper has been continuously sharing with us that drive, so thank you, Juniper. So you can find all this material in that folder in the Google Drive, and I would recommend that you would go into that Google Drive and maybe keep it open because we will be using a few tools there, including a slide deck. All right, folks, I'm going to ask one more time, hoping that most people are here. If you can see on the bottom of your screen a reaction, could you please put a thumbs up to let me know that you're back in this? Oh, this is fun. I got some sparkles. But could you please put a thumbs up with to let me know you're back? Okay. Hunter, Wendy, that's great. Oscar's in the room. Okay, I think we've got the majority in here. So let's begin, shall we? So now is a fun part. We've heard a lot about the DHS program. We've seen a little bit about what those different cross-sectional surveys are. So hopefully it's tying together a lot of what you've seen with Juniper and JLOS and data management, what you've heard of with cross-sectional surveys with Sangoro, and now with Sammy giving us a bit more detail. So now we're gonna do a little bit of role play as our data. We are going to pretend that we are from the Emily Office of a National Malaria Control Program. And we're going to pretend to be two countries, Zambia and Tanzania, given that the majority of you are one of these nationalities. The program is planning to have an update to their national strategic plan. Often countries will make a national strategic plan to say where they plan to go and how do they plan to get there when they're dealing with malaria control. In order to know where they want to go, they need to collect evidence to understand the current context of the malaria epidemiology. Since about 2018, we have identified that a one-size-fits-all approach is not appropriate when it comes to malaria, and therefore many countries tend to run what we call a stratification exercise. Stratification is trying to understand geographically the level of the context of malaria epidemiology so that you are deploying different interventions in different geographies to help get the best impact you can. So your job is to collect as much information, knowing the resources that you currently know that would potentially be useful for stratification. We've already pre-selected the groups here, and I'm hoping that most people are available online. But for the Zambia group, we are going to have Yasini, Harriet, and I apologize, Harriet, for misspelling your name. Jacqueline, Oscar, and Sangoro is going to be there as a second facilitator to be helping out. We've tried to swap you guys, knowing a little bit that some of you are Tanzanian nationals, so let's see if you guys can understand a different country in a different context. The next one is going to be the Tanzania group, where we've put most of the Zambians in. So we're going to have Winde, Powell, as well as Sarah, Nema, Phoebe, and Usman will be a secondary facilitator just helping around. In the groups, you're going to also have Hunter, who is a Map Perth facilitator, and you're going to have Ruby, who is also another Map Perth facilitator, and Sammy will be joining Ruby in that group as well. Both Ruby and Hunter, as well as Sammy, are very well versed with also alternative sources such as the Malaria Atlas website, if you'd like them to help. But they're really there just to facilitate you. And so they're going to try minimally speak, but help you with keeping time in your groups. So a little guidance, we're going to separate into 2 breakout rooms. You'll have about 30 minutes of discussion time. Each team is going to build on a presentation. And so we have shared in the Google folder, and Juniper is going to help me with putting the link to that slide deck, a Google slide which you're going to populate. We're hoping to keep to a maximum of 5 slides per country, ideally because we're only going to take about 5 minutes to present back these findings. In each team, I'm going to ask that you identify a team lead who is going to help with facilitating, as well as a person to take notes. So this person can use the Google Doc, or they can use a document, or they can use the slides just to put notes as the conversation is going. In each team, like I mentioned, there's a facilitator that's going to ensure that you keep time. And then I ask that one member of the group helps to present those findings. That person could be the lead or the note taker, or a different person if you want to give an opportunity to everyone. But the expectation is that everybody please tries to participate as actively as possible, helping to create visualizations for that slide deck in general. On the right here, I have put a couple of potential resources. These are also available on the slide deck, so you do not have to worry if this presentation goes missing. With that ado, there's just a couple of questions that I wanted you all to consider. As we've talked about malaria cross-sectional surveys, when you're thinking about stratification, think about the trend of malaria in your country. Think of the interventions in your country. What is the current bed net coverage in your country? How many people tend to seek care? Can you see that at a subnational level? And if possible, what are the trends in mortality rate? Remember, DHS is not the only resource that you have available here. There is also the Malaria Atlas website, the World Malaria Report, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, or GED project, and also the President's Malaria Initiative website that we would recommend if you cannot find mortality in the DHS itself. With that being said, I'm going to hand over to Juniper now to put us into our breakout rooms, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much. So I have prepared all the breakout rooms for Zambia and Tanzania. Maybe in the DAR office, if you are in the same group, you might want to go to the other office so you can speak freely and there won't be any echoes. That's where our other people went to another room as well, because we're breaking into 2 groups as well. If there's any technical issue, please chat or come back to the main room. If your connection drops out, you will come back to the main room, but I will be, and then I will place you back into your room. So it will just take a minute. So are you guys all ready? Okay. I have just started, so please join all your rooms.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I know it must have seemed incredibly short for almost everybody here. But this is a big part of like how stratification actually does happen. You don't tend to get that much time in the room, by the way, when such things happen. But I hope you guys have had a good learning session. And just like, remember, you didn't have to answer every question. Some visualizations would be great. If you have points, that's enough just to have some kind of discussion. So now we're going to move on to the discussion time. Does any country feel comfortable going first, or should we go in the order of the slide deck? All right. How about I suggest this? We go in the order of the slide deck. And so with the first group that is on the slide deck, I believe is Zambia. Zambia, do you feel comfortable, team lead Harriet, starting to present some of your outputs?
Yeah, we are finishing up on just a few things, but
Okay.
we would be.
All right. So I see the presenter is going to be Jacqueline for you guys.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. So remember, you guys have 5 minutes to present. We'll try to keep to time just so that we allow the Tanzania group also the ability to present. We're also going to give maybe 2-3 minutes per session to ask questions, because remember, you've got the Zambian colleagues that might have lots of questions for you about why you made a certain visual and things. So Harriet or Jacqueline, please just let us know when you're ready.
So, I place this. I put the blank slide on this one, right?
Yeah, I think we should place it before the one.
Before the one.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's close up. Please, let's start presenting so that we don't lose time. So if you could share your screen to put the presentation up. Is Jacqueline in the room with you, Harriet? No, I think Jacqueline was separate, wasn't she? Oh, has Jacqueline left? It doesn't look like Jacqueline's here. So Harriet, do you have another person that would be okay with being the presenter, or maybe yourself or Oscar?
I think maybe Kokoda will take on the presentation.
All right. Great, Kokoda, please share the screen, and remember, please stick to 5 minutes so that we have some time to ask questions. Are you having trouble with sharing the slides? Do you want me to share them? So at the lower bottom, you'll see a kind of green sign that says share. If you click that, it will open up and you'll see either windows or screen, and that should allow you to share. Let us know if you don't see that.
Just remove the slides and do present.
Yeah.
So Harriet, what's going on there?
One moment.
Yeah.
Okay, we can see the Zoom website Chrome page. I think the next tab is the slides.
From there.
All right, the floor is yours, Kokoda, to present on Zambia. Remember, 5 minutes, please.
Oh, yes. Following the
Slideshow.
So, in India. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Wasting time. We will try to look at the data regarding Zambia, and we use. First of all, we have this. This is our group, and we have team lead, but prepare and presenter, unfortunately, she's not around. So I will take it. So we try to collect information about the country regarding malaria in Zambia, and we try to answer some of the questions from here, but we were not able to answer all of the questions. And we use DHIS compiler and the map website, and the indicator we considered or we found out in this country is malaria incidence rate. Incidence, which is cases per 1,000 people in the country. And this is the trend for the malaria incidence with this as predicted in the map website. And can you see? Yeah, at the top is Zambia, and the bottom line is the global incidence rate, and you can see the rate is higher than in comparison with the global. And this is the percentage of children, the prevalence of malaria for the children under 5 years age, and the pregnant women. Where is my screen? I didn't see.
I think you moved past.
Yeah. Can everyone see my screen, please?
Yes, we can see your screen.
See it from inside.
Because Yeah, this is the prevalence of malaria in the country. And again, the bottom line is the global trend. And the upper one is the country, Zambia. And we can see malaria prevalence has been increasing increasing 2013 to 14. And as time goes, it went decreasing, and it will also like fluctuating. But general trend is decreasing. These are the stratifications, which consider the malaria prevalence in 5 years age children. And this is the country subnational. And we also look at the population who's listed an ITM. The last 94 survey, you can see we break down by age, by education. Yeah, we break down by education, and we can. This is the difference. This one's by age. Yeah, we break down by age. The population of people by age is left at the night before survey. And what we notice here, we are looking at 0 to 4 years. And as from 2013 to 14, the number of people who sleep in the ITMs have been increasing. We can see the length of backwards. And we also checked this thing. We also checked the IPCP dose for the pregnant women. We can see we break down by education. We can see people with high education generally, they tend to
Thank you, Kokoda. So we've run out of time. We're going to stop there. We do have to be quite strict because we've not got much time. So owing to the time constraint, actually, can we move on to the Tanzania presentation? I don't see a presenter's name. Winde, Neema, is there a particular person who's going to present?
Stop sharing. And take on.
Yes, we have a presenter.
All right, who is that?
Just to say. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is. All right, Neema, if you're the presenter, please go ahead. I apologize, we are going to stay a little longer, but we're going to give Neema 5 minutes, please.
I'm trying to start the slide. I'm not sure.
If you go to the top left where you see share, next to share you see slideshow. So you can actually click slideshow and it should go into a presentation mode.
Oh, okay.
So next to it, can you see slideshow?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, so we felt a bit pressed for time. We were only able to make progress on the first 2 questions. And the data that we primarily used was the DHIS2 data. So for the first question around what the trend of malaria is, I'm trying to move. we from the DHS2 data, we were only able to find the indicator for under 5 malaria prevalence for children between 6 to 64 months, I believe, 59 months that have been tested using the rapid diagnostic test. And this is what the trend was for the last 12 years. I sort of and we can see overall there has been a decline, but we know in 2015 there had been a sharp spike. But yeah, overall the rates in the more recent years are lesser than in 2007. And this is partial representation data. The data doesn't really get into the granular details. So we really see how that burden spreads across different geographical units. I think that's, yeah, a bit of a and then for the second question, we did look at the access to insect treated net. Again, the 15 years, and we can see that there was a sharp increase from 2004 up until somewhere in 2011, 2012. Then in the 10 years, the increase has been steady. Yeah, so that is as far as we could get in our analysis. I think we would have been able to make much progress had we had more time. But I would also like to hear if anyone from our has any thoughts that they would like to share in addition to this.
All right. Unfortunately, the last objective, we could not obtain data on the mortality. I did try and check. So I think the mortality data is missing unless we be guided on how. And then the fourth, is it number three? Number three objective. Yeah, due to time, I think we cannot present. I think I sent some few slides with Juniper. She couldn't add them. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Tanzania team. And so, yeah, you can see like 30 minutes is pretty short, right? So when you're working in a team, it's often useful to divide and conquer or take advantage of skill sets in like a very diverse team. So I know that we are 2 minutes past the hour mark. So those who need to leave, please feel free to leave. Thank you for staying the extra 2 minutes. I'm actually going to stay on for another 30 minutes in case folks want to talk a little bit more and have discussion time. In addition, if you guys have any questions or curiosities, please add your questions maybe to the Google Slides, or put down your own comments. I know each of you are experts or you know more about the other country. So if you see something that maybe the Zambia team did and you're from Zambia and you know a bit more, or you want to have a question, please put it down as a comment in the slides. Questions like around, how is this going to be useful? How would you use this information to help with stratification? Would you make a different plot? Is the plot sensible? Think about things about, does the visualization that you created help tell a story that helps to answer something? Because remember, you were acting as M&E officers in order to support a stratification exercise. So with that in mind, I'm just going to say thank you, everybody, for sticking around for these extra few minutes now. Juniper has added in a little survey that is included. It's the post survey for the malaria epi module that Sangoro led, as well as a couple of questions for the data fishing exercise. So please don't forget to fill in that survey form, preferably as soon as possible or right after this. But otherwise, thank you guys for attending. And I'm going to stay online. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to continue asking away.
Okay,
Thanks.
just for our team, I think maybe Juniper has added some data on mortality. I think that's what she meant in the communication group. Maybe she can clarify on the data.
Yes, thank
The
you.
link the link posted, is that what you meant?
Yes, so I just added a link where you can go to the Malaria Atlas website because you mentioned that you couldn't find mortality data on for Tanzania, and the Malaria Atlas project website. If you go on it, you can select mortality. Dependent if people are interested, we can also like share screens and show how it can be done, or you can explore when you can. But yes, please, if you have more time, in the previous survey, we have been asked to keep on time these sessions. So that's why we were trying to wrap it up and everything. And again, we will continue to like work on our timing and everything. So we have time for discussions. But if anyone has any questions, I think it would be really cool to hear from the different countries as well, that like, oh, that was an interesting graph that your team picked. How did you pick it, or like how did the other teams find the exercise? It would be great to hear your experiences if possible.
Yeah, I think I can go first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for me, yeah, hi. I think for me, for Team Zambia, I think I really appreciated their preferences where they compared, they had put, I don't know if that was embedded, where they had put the global kind of reference. So you kind of see that in as much as the trend of prevalence is kind of reducing, but we are still above, we are still too much above the global level. So I think that was a very nice and cool graph to show. And I would definitely love to know how to do that. I don't know if that reference point of global was an embedded one or not, but that was a cool one. Thanks.
Thanks. That's actually from the Malaria Atlas website as well. So the link that Juniper shared for mortality, it has 3 different indicators. It has prevalence, incidence, and mortality. And then, yes, you have the default of the global, and then you can add different country trends on it. And then it also allows you to go to a certain extent of subnational, possibly regional. Okay, yeah. But I
Okay,
would
great.
actually
Thanks.
recommend explore. There's so many options here. So like there's also, if you haven't looked at it, the IHME Viz Hub. So some of that information is also available there. It's interesting to look at both sometimes. Any other curiosities, questions? What did folks think about the trends? So let's maybe stick to Zambia. Did you notice that even if you're looking at prevalence or incidence, if you're somewhere around 2017 onwards, the line was relatively flat, like to an extent, right? What does that tell you? If you were a decision maker, would that be something of concern, you think?
So I think that shows that either the interventions that have been deployed have sort of achieved like the maximum effect, and there's some kind of a plateau.
Yeah, it's possible, right? Like, why would they otherwise be stagnant? Like, sometimes these are nice investigative questions that come from when you see one visual. And so, Harriet, thank you for pointing that out. Do you notice something else that's a bit peculiar? Well, not super visual, but a little peculiar about the lines. Can anyone tell me what the dotted lines represent?
Would anyone
Or
like
the
to share
dashed
their
lines?
screen?
Oh, sure. Should I share the visual, the slides? All right, guys. I'm gonna keep it in non-presentation mode so that we can just quickly shift between, but I'm hoping you can see the slides generally. So this is the incidence of Zambia, and then this is the prevalence. Let's keep to the prevalence, but can anyone else tell me something a little unusual in the more recent years with this map? Oh, sorry, Grant.
Are those confidence intervals?
Yes, they are, or credible intervals in the Bayesian world.
So I think they've gotten there's a wider range of values.
What does that mean in particular? Like when you interpret wide ranges of confidence or credible intervals?
I think I'll hand that to the team. The lines, the dotted lines, they represent confidence intervals. I think they get wide, so the confidence interval gets wider as like in more recent years. Yeah.
It means there is an answer, because these are the predicted values.
You say that.
Yeah, you say on the screen.
Yeah.
There is high answer between them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
uncertainty.
maybe just to try.
Sure, Wendy.
Yes. So there is some sort of instability in terms of data deviating from the true mean. Some of these issues can be identified due to some sort of there could be some outliers or extraneous variables that are there. Yeah, something to do with data, how it deviates away from the true mean. And in some cases, it could be age, or is it about age?
It
Yes,
could be, because this is children 2 to 10 years.
Or 2 to 10 is already specified. Yeah, but I'm still trying to find out what could cause these extraneous credible intervals or confidence intervals. Yeah, but something like that. There is a problem with our data.
So one of the things I saw with the Zambia team as they were looking in the stat compiler is they noticed that publicly available, and Jigos mentioned this, publicly available, not all MISs of Zambia are made available. The graph that you see here comes from the Malaria Atlas website, which is modeled prevalence, which means you're not actually seeing raw data. You're seeing a modeled trend. So we don't actually know what data has gone into making this Zambia trend. So possibly the fact that we're seeing higher credible intervals or wider might actually be because of the lack of information, that maybe MAP doesn't get all the access to all the MISs and they haven't been included in here. Hence, the lack of data makes things wider because you're less certain about the modeled trend. And so these are sometimes questions that you might want to ask when you look at something. Well, what is in here? Why does it look this way? Let's take something from the Tanzania group, shall we? Let's take this trend. So again, if you were to compare, the Zambia group had a map of ages 2 to 10, and this is a map of under 5. What does this kind of, what take home do you get out of this graph generally? Anybody? Anybody have a suggestion on what they're seeing, a description that they want to share?
Okay, just to try. Yeah, they could be. Now the problem is that we are looking at the whole range, but looking at the starting period of 2007, when we were recording these cases, there is a significant decrease, I would say, by almost a decrease by 55%, somewhere there, 50 to 55% in terms of malaria cases compared to 2007 and 2022. Comparing it with years in between, there's been a fluctuation in terms of the prevalence of these malaria cases under the age of 5 years up to death. And this could mean that there could be some years when there have been lapse in terms of interventions, and some years where interventions have been effective. So a number of social political indicators could be at play. I don't know which one is the Magufuli era here. Yes, something like that.
I mean, great points. Yes, like you see this change, but then you also see the fluctuations. But remember what Sammy mentioned. Do we know the time of these surveys? What if 2017 was and 2012 are done in dry seasons, and that's why we're seeing drops, versus 2015 might have been done in the rainy season when we know malaria is at its highest. So without the understanding of when this survey was done, we're not particularly sure if this represents the same standard seasonal period, right? And one thing that's also interesting here, notice in the more recent years, 7.3 and 7.9. So it's more or less, if you're looking also at Zambia, it's kind of looking the same. Granted, we don't know when these surveys happened, so maybe 2022 happened at a different time. But what would you question about that? What would you think about that as a decision maker? Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi.
Sorry, which period are you asking for similarities?
If you look at 2017 and 2022,
okay,
it's about 7.3 to 7.9. So it hasn't really changed, right? And that's the most recent years. So if you're a decision maker, you're most likely going to be looking at your most recent years. What would you question about those numbers?
Jack, you want to speak, Jack? Go ahead.
I'm digesting it, so when I'm ready, I will speak.
Any other takers on the call? I apologize, I can't see everybody on the call, so You're going to have to speak up to me.
Yeah, for me, again, 2017 to 2022, there has been a slight increase of malaria cases under the age of 5. Not so much in terms of significance increase, but there has been an increase, a slight increase. And yeah, this takes back again to the issues of interventions that are being, fostered on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't assume more in regards to climatic factors, but probably the issue of interventions is at play. It could be some lapse of interventions in certain regions that has caused this graph. Yeah. So one thing interesting, as you heard our colleague who was presenting, when we used our map, so you find that the whole
Is this this
whole
one,
country,
right?
yes, this one, okay. So you find that overall, the whole country is doing well in terms of maybe coverage of these interventions, but there could be 1, 2, 3, 4 districts within that period that are extremely not doing well. And so those could cause some changes in terms of the overall national prevalence to be a slight adjustment from the previous years. Yeah, that's my
Yeah, and
thinking.
it's a great point. And it's why in the malaria world, WHO initiated stratification and said in their global technical strategies, which, by the way, group, I highly recommend you read the global technical strategy for malaria. But it talks about this whole fact that a one size fits all approach is not ideal. So when you look at Tanzania like this, you're seeing just one value, and Winde makes such an important point that there is a lot of heterogeneity there, that there might be some areas that are super high, which is why you're not seeing a change, versus some areas that are doing super well. And so it'd be really nice to actually see such a map at a sub-regional, at a sub-national level. So on the stat compiler, actually, there is the ability to change from national to regional. I think it's national, zone, region, and then sometimes they have it available sub-region. Not always. But that's another reason why maybe you want to go see the map website, because the map website allows you to see that at a sub-national level, possibly. Something interesting about this map. Do we know what year this represents? Can anyone tell me what year it represents?
Probably the only person who knows is that who selected things and took the screenshot, because it's just not.
Yeah. So that's just something to note when you're making visuals. Ensure that you put the right information up, right? So when you have a map, maybe consider making sure that people will know that this is technically 2022. And this is what the legend means. This is the source that's not available. I know that its source is lacking owing to time constraints. But these are important components of when you create a visual or when you copy a visual. Think about, is all the information available for the person to take home and know exactly what this picture is showing, whether you made it or not. Okay, so that goes for any of the visuals that we see in both the Zambia and the Tanzania slide decks. Let's look at so one of the things you guys mentioned was interventions. So if we go to this slide, you talked about interventions and the lack of effectiveness might be the reason why we're seeing that, right? Which is why we had some questions to consideration, because one of the biggest interventions that has been deployed, I would say, in the last decade mostly, is bed nets, right? Besides treatment, which has been fundamental, and testing. And so that's why I asked for the question of what does access to BetNets look like? And so this was a nice plot that the Tanzania group put together, right? It's like you're looking at the trend and you see this like very interesting upward trend. But again, let's talk about recent years. What is going on here? What would you take home from that? Maybe any Tanzanian colleagues in the room might have a bit of a better idea of like why does access drop in their notice by the way, DHS, MIS, DHS. Could it be based on survey timings possibly?
I would also mention that nets have different lifetime, don't they? It's have a thing because I think like long lasting treated nets, I think it's for 3 years that they last, but some other they can only last for like maybe 3 months, 6 months. If you get holes in it as well, they're efficiency as well drops. So maybe everyone got nets, and then maybe everyone just stuck to those nets and kept using those.
Yeah, maybe part of this visual, if you add when the campaign happens, so you know, oh, a campaign maybe happened in 2011 when the AIS happened. AIS, by the way, is the AIDS survey, and oftentimes they also collect a couple of malaria indicators, by the way. But yeah, maybe a campaign just so happened to happen then, and that's why it's 74.5%. But maybe this was right, like maybe the DHS of 2015-16 happened right before a campaign was to happen. So maybe if like Juniper said, adding in this visualization when a campaign happened could actually be quite valuable in knowing what you're seeing.
And just to add, whilst we were chatting and everything, I quickly put in not to just pitch the map products, but I did take some screenshots from the website.
This one.
So, yes, and a couple more underneath it, just in case you haven't had time to explore it. So again, I just quickly took these screenshots like right now, so you get a better understanding that you can select, pixel level and subnational level visualizations as well, and data, and export everything quite nicely as well. And if you go to the slide either above or the very last slide as well, you can select.
This one?
Yes. You can select pins, so you can see on the map that like I just put in some pins for locations. You can also visualize on the big graph up there. You can see the national. So Tanzania, you can see the red line, and then you can see the two different pins that are in blue and yellow. It might be a little bit hard to see, but again, you can make these comparisons because, again, with that bar chart, a lot of information is like kind of like dropping off and everything. But you can play around with the map website quite a bit. Thank you so much. And you can see as well that like there's incidence rate, there's prevalence for 100 children, there's mortality rate, and you can again like just click on the website and select all these different things. And on the pixels as well, like if you have coordinates, it's very easy to just put them there. So if you want to maybe very quickly have a meeting and you want to compare like two different villages, you drop the coordinates for the two villages, you get these pins, you take a screenshot, and it looks really cool. So again, it's a really useful website. Not to be biased.
Yeah. In fact, I think if you guys want to do a bit of an extra fun thing, I would recommend put as many locations in your country as you can. And then if you notice there's that little button that says download PF rate full data, you guys have learned some awesome techniques in Excel, I believe, with Juniper and JLOs. If you click that button, it's going to download for you a .csv file, which is a comma-separated version file, which is more or less an Excel file. I would try and make a plot in Excel using that data. So put maybe up to 10 points in a country and just see what you can make, if you can make a line graph the way that it looks like in the map website, just to test your skills.
And to add more to the fun, there's also an R package to access the malaria address data. So for the next session, we will be diving into the world of R, and I really hope that everyone was able to install it on their computers. Could you maybe just raise your hand or just say that it's all installed and you're ready to go for the next session? That would be fantastic. But no, I think if we are all wrapped up today, I will let you finish all the cake if there's anything left. I don't know, it might have been a little bit of an interesting start for everyone online that we started with Susan's birthday. But yeah, enjoy the cake over there, and I hope this was useful and everything. And I will see you guys next week.